So once you have all your pieces cut out, we're going to want to fine tune them. To do that, we're going to need to use the grinder. What I'd like to do first is I try to set up all my pieces right next to each other, and I start on the back of the board. So we try to push it up against a flat area or all the way over to one edge, and we work our way from one corner out. Each piece could only have like a tiny bit that it needs to be shaved off. Okay, so for example, if I start back here, I'm going to want to work on this very far corner piece. I'm going to look and see where it is that these pieces are touching. So if I push this red piece all the way up against it, or even overlap it a little bit, I can mark out, I can see where this corner up here needs just a tiny bit that's shaved off. So what I would do then is either I would shave off a little bit of this red one so it fits up closer, or I'd shave up a little bit of the white clear so that it gets up closer. So essentially wherever it's touching, you want to grind down so that it can slide up and the whole thing will touch. That's how we work with this. That's how we slowly think about which parts to grind down and make it fit piece by piece. If we start off here and there randomly and you make, like, let's say I make this piece fits that spot perfectly, but for some reason they're not working together, it's because we just need to be looking at where they're touching. The areas that they're touching and the areas between need to be hashed out. So we're going to grind off the areas where they're touching. We're going to slide it up. To do that, we're going to need to use the grinders. So to use the grinders, we're going to do a few things first. One, you're going to put your safety glasses on. Super important. The glass is going to be ground down. There's water in here and it's going to soak up most of the glass and sink it down into the water so you're not breathing it. However, anything could splash back. Often when I am grinding, I can feel it on my cheeks a little bit afterwards, or like on the front of your clothes. So it's definitely, the little bits are coming back at you. So you need to make sure you're wearing your safety glasses. You can wear an apron if you'd like. Again, it's splashing back water, so it could be getting your clothes wet. Nothing will stain, it'll wash out fine, but you might want to wear that if you don't want to get wet. So safety glasses first. The second thing is at the end here, there is a container of rags. That's for helping wipe off your pieces of glass, but also if a little bit of water gets out on the counter, you can wipe it up. Down here, there's also a container of water. So the first thing you need to do to use the grinders is to check the water levels. Essentially, when you look on the top white part, you can see water. When you turn it on, just by flicking the switch, okay, you should hear that it sounds nice and smooth. You should also be able to see that there's water bubbling up over here. So if you don't see that, what we gotta do is we gotta add in a little water, and all you gotta do is just dump it on top. It takes like 3 whole cups of this to fill it up entirely. So over a weekend where it might have dried out, you might have to add a couple cups, but essentially at this point, you should probably just dump in a little bit until you turn it on and there's water bubbling up, okay? The water safety is the most important thing when it comes to this, because again, like I said, it's gonna be shaving off pieces of the glass and it's gonna suck it back down into the water instead of up in the air for you to breathe. The sponge back here is pulling up the water out of the bottom and rotating around on here. This is a diamond tipped grinder, which means that, you know, it can shave down the glass, and to keep it cool so it doesn't crack your glass, it has to have that water as well. So the water is a double use, one to suck down the places that are ground off, and the other one is for keeping this cool and so your pieces of glass don't crack. So I mentioned before, trying to work from one corner over, and so piece by piece, you try to grind off the tiniest little bit at a time and see how it works. You're grinding, putting it back, grinding, putting it back. Grinding is actually super easy. It's just a matter of figuring out where the right place is to grind. To grind, you fill it up with water, get your safety gear on, turn on the button, okay? And then you pick up your first piece. I'm actually going to grind down a little bit on this side over here. You can take a Sharpie and mark out the areas you want to grind. As soon as you touch it to the glass though and the water, it's gonna, the grinder in the water, it's gonna start taking off a little bit though. That Sharpie can go away pretty quick. So you can do that if you want. You can keep marking it out, have a Sharpie over here, dry it off, wipe it off, and then grind some more. Or you can just keep eyeballing it back and forth. So if you hold it like this and put it up against it, it's not gonna be flat, it won't be even, it can like jerk back. What you're supposed to do is supposed to lay it down flat, and you're supposed to slightly push it back. And we don't want to hold it in one spot so it gets really hot on the glass. We want to slowly move it back and forth. That's it. Essentially, there shouldn't be any harm done if you do it that way. It's rotating one way, and it just keeps going and going and going. And so you just hold it there, move it a little bit, and it does the work for you. You don't need to like push really hard. You don't need to like move it really fast. The one thing you do need to watch out for is hair or anything hanging like a necklace, lanyards, earbuds that are going to get caught up in it. Okay, so you stand back, keep back further, you have your safety glasses, and all you're going to do is push it back towards it. You can hear it grinding a little bit. And it's just slowly shaving down pieces of the glass. When you're doing this, you want to make sure you're actually on the, which by the way, you can touch this fine with your hand. Just don't get hair caught in it. It won't cut you. But if you notice that there's a rough spot, there's a rough spot that's got the diamond tip, and then there's gold on top that's just straight metal. We want to lay it flat and push it back so it's touching the rough spot. This actually has the texture to grind it down. So for some reason, every now and then these will slide down, they'll get loose, and the metal part is the only part that's showing the gold, and there's no texture there. It'll just scrape on your glass, it'll sound really loud. I just need to come over and adjust it. Let me know if that happens. Okay, so push it back and forth. And then I just double check and see how it's fitting. If I need to shave off more, if I need to move on to another piece. You're looking for the areas that are touching next to an area that isn't touching. We want the whole thing to touch. And so if you look where there's a gap, where it doesn't touch, okay, where there's a gap, then there's going to be an area that is touching. That area that's touching is preventing the rest of it from sliding up. So you shave off the area that's touching, and then all of a sudden all of it will touch. Okay, so essentially you're looking for your outliers, your things that stick out. So this can be really time consuming, just making it fit. In the end, it's okay if you have some gaps between, those will be clear. Sometimes that enhances your project, sometimes it just, it makes it look a little different, but sometimes it helps it. What the most important thing in the end though is that your outside lines are pretty straight. That's going to be pretty obvious when we go to fire it if everything looks straight except for this little blob that kind of sticks out a little bit. Okay, so we want to make sure everything is straight as possible. It's fitting the way that we would like it to be fitting, in the sense that it looks okay. I'm going to have gaps between my red petals because I'd like more definition, that's a separate petal, not just kind of like a blob with things sticking out of it. But some of yours have very nice crisp lines, and if you have a gap between, it's gonna make a big difference. So think about that as you're going. Try not to be back here for too long. There was only 3 grinders, and other people are going to want to use them. So be efficient in your time. I wouldn't be cutting and then coming back and cutting, back and forth. I would get all your pieces cut, and then come grind. So that is how you can use the grinders nice and safely. Okay. When you're done at the end of the day, all you got to do is grab one of these. Wipe up the area if you made a mess, if there's water all over the place, put it back there. And once it is ground down, then we can talk about cleaning the pieces and how we're going to glue it down to a clear piece to fire.